Hello and welcome everyone. We're gonna give everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. I'm Sabrina Paganoni and I'm here from the HEALEY Center for ALS and Mass General, and tonight I'm here with Catherine Small and Alison Bullat, our amazing patient navigators. So thank you for being here. And I see that people are joining from the waiting room. Thank you. All right. So I think people are in now. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So as always, as you know, we are here every week to provide updates about the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. As you know, this is a perpetual adaptive trial. So as of 2022, we are testing 5 drugs. Unfortunately, the first regimen A, was stopped earlier this year because the drug is now having positive effects. However, the other 4 regimens are still active. Regimens B, C, and D are fully enrolled, but are following participants, and we expect results in 2022. The 5th regimen, regimen E, just started enrolling participants, which is very exciting. So there are plenty of spots for people who are interested in participating in the platform trial. At this time, we have 1 regimen that's up and running, and we are working with several industry partners to continue to add new regimens. So this is certainly not the end of the enrollment plan. We will continue to open up new spots. But at this time, we are enrolling for regimen E. Next slide. To briefly review the timelines of our results for the first few regimens, we are anticipating results later this year. We shared these sort of tentative timelines before. Hopefully, no more impact from COVID on all of these, although obviously we do want to say that anything can always happen these days, but hopefully we will be able to stick with these timelines. And really the idea is to release top-line results, which is really the bottom line, what you really need to know and want to know this summer. Between July and September, we're going to have the top-line results for the first few regimens, and then the final study reports by the end of the year. Next slide. And so in terms of enrollment updates, as of today, again, we are really excited that we are enrolling for regimen E, and we're really thankful for your participation. You know, obviously we could not do this trial and advance ALS research without your participation. We have randomized 15 people into regimen E, and obviously we are continuing to look for participants. So if you are on the line and you have any questions, please contact our patient navigators. We'll share their contact information later, or talk to your physician and your ALS care center. Next slide. At this time, we are enrolling for regimen E at 21 sites. They're listed here. They include both sort of the sites that have been with us from the very beginning of the trial, as well as new sites. We're very excited to enter new geographies, and the sites that are in green are the new additions to the platform trial. So welcome to everyone. We are also going into new states, and again, we continue to add sites and activate them for regimen E. Now, the original sites that were working on regimens A, B, C, and D are still active. We're working with them to activate them also for regimen E. Next slide. So if you and also we are continuing to activate more. These are the next ones that we think are going to be activated hopefully very soon. We'll provide updates next week. Hopefully they'll be in the group of activated sites by next week. Next slide. And if you want to know the status of the center near you, please check our website. The QR code brings you directly to that page that you can see here. You can see a screenshot, and essentially what you can see here is the status of specific sites. So if a site is listed as active, not recruiting, it means that they're still active in the platform trial and they're active on the previous regimens, but they're not recruiting for regimen E yet. Instead, the sites that are bolded, like Lehigh Valley, which actually happens to be a new site, if they're listed as recruiting, it means they are actively recruiting now for regimen E. Next slide. Tonight, we really wanted to share that we have made a few updates to our website. So we continue to get input and feedback from all of you about our website and materials that might be of interest for the community. And so we actually have a new and improved webpage on expanded access, which we're really excited about. As you may know from previous webinars, in addition to the platform trial, we also have an EAP companion to the platform trial for people who are not eligible for the platform trial itself. And so people have asked us to share more information about expanded access. And again, the screenshot here is the screenshot of the new website or webpage that we created thanks to the help of many of you. Actually, we have a fantastic patient advisory committee that provided a lot of input in terms of the actual language and what's of most interest to the patient community. So I would invite you to check out our website. There's a list of programs that are part of the EAP companion to the platform trial. You can see it here. And if you click on the plus sign, then it will bring you to more information. So there's lots of pages that you can scroll through to get as much information as possible. And again, the QR code will bring you there. Next slide. And we also have a number of common questions about expanded access, which again, we think might be helpful to provide more information, so that if you have questions outside of these webinars, you can always go there. And lots of links to other helpful websites, including the NEALS website. So we're working closely with NEALS to really complement each other's website so that we can provide lots of helpful information and information for both patients and providers. So if your physicians have any questions about starting an EAP at their site, they can find some information on these links, but also they can contact us and we can walk them through the process. Next slide. And as always, Catherine and Alison are here to answer your questions, anytime, you want to email them or call them. And we're very happy to continue to have guest speakers and specifically speakers from foundations that support the platform trial. We're going to have Dr. Dave from the ALS Association joining us in a couple of weeks, and then Peter Foss from ALS Finding a Cure in May. Next. And as always, we are planning more slides, more guest speakers and special topics. And I do want to highlight that we had a great science webinar about regimen E, which is the regimen that's enrolling right now. The link is on the slide right now. So if you want to have more information about the drug, obviously you can ask now. You can call our patient navigator or also watch the recording of the webinar. All our webinars are recorded. The slides are all available for downloading. So really there's a wealth of information on the website. So that's why we wanted to share the links. And with that, I think we can stop sharing the slides. And I see Dr. Cudkowicz is here with us and happy to take your questions.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry it was late, and it's so good to see everybody again. We have a couple questions. Two are really just comments, and really thanks to Sabrina and also Dr. Barry for testifying yesterday at the FDA AdCom for Amylyx. I want to echo my thanks also to Sabrina for everything that she did with Amylyx and with the community and all those powerful voices to try to convince the FDA to do the right thing. So one of the questions is, do you have any takeaways from that close vote?
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously we were hoping in a better result, but the fact that the committee, different people have different opinions, again, tells us that, we still have hope and we still know that there is a path forward. Whether that's going to be approval now or later, we will see. Certainly, there were a few committee members that were supportive. So I'll take that as a positive sign. And then we still have to see what happens over the next few weeks.
Yeah, there's a few more questions about that, and I'm happy to answer some of them too, but I'll ask you. First is, let's see, let me get this. Do you think that the approval trajectory for any of the platform trial drugs are affected by yesterday's disappointing vote by the FDA committee?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first, and then Merit, obviously, if you want to comment. I really don't see like a link, or I don't think there's any specific concern based on yesterday's vote. Again, yesterday was mostly about some detailed statistical, technical details that I don't think pertain to the platform trial.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add, whenever I have this basic rule that whenever you're upset about something, you take 24 hours before you speak your email. And I think for this one, I might have to take 48 hours, but I really think they got it wrong. Now, I don't own any stock in Amylyx. I mean, obviously, I like the founders. We helped them do this. I believe in this drug. This drug would have been approved if it was a cancer drug. Well, no question. They wouldn't even have needed an AdCom. We have two different standards at the FDA for oncology and neurology, and it's just, I think it's awful. I think they got it wrong on the statistics, the FDA, and of interest, the statistician on the AdCom, who's probably the only one there, and I don't mean that in any disrespect, that none of us really understood all the subtleties of the statistical conversation. The only one that really understood it, he voted yes. And he also said that he thought that the way that Amylyx did the statistics was right for this duration and approach of study. So it was really unfortunate. And also, I'll say that the way the question was asked was really in a way that was really kind of a setup for an answer of no. So I do still think there's hope that it'll get approved. And I do think that we need to keep advocating for change at the FDA, that for a serious illness like this, a single study could be approved, conditional maybe, that they do another study just like they are in Europe, so that people don't have to wait. So I thought it was a very disappointing outcome. I know a lot of people here did, and but I don't think it's over. We have to keep the advocacy going, and so that's one thing. And for the platform trial, we have met with the FDA many times. We have submitted our statistical analysis plan. We've gotten their feedback. We've listened to their feedback. I don't think it'll depend on the results of the trial. If they're positive, I think they have a good chance for going forward. If they're equivocal, they might need to do another study, but we'll be a lot smarter in the summer. Yeah. So there's the question about the BIP 078 program. Please comment on the cancellation of that program. And that's the C9 gene therapy trial from Biogen.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first, and then again, Merit, if you want to add. I mean, obviously, that's another disappointing piece of news, obviously, this week. I think there's still a lot of interest in genetically based treatment for ALS, and I think that's really important for people who carry familial forms of the disease. And so I think I mean, again, I'm sure that there will be more and more C9 targeted programs. Some of them are actually already up and running. So really disappointing, but I'm sure there will be other ways to tackle this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I think one key thing is the field is committed to trying to develop treatments for all forms of ALS, and that we have to figure out how to do gene therapies, and that we have to, hopefully Biogen will be sharing the more details so the field can learn and just keep getting better at this. There's another question about the Amylyx, and so in regards to Amylyx, the FDA raised some legitimate concerns yesterday on the drug. What's your take on their comments?
Yeah, again, many of these concerns were, as I said yesterday, so it's not a secret, it's all on the record and recorded. But basically, there were a few concerns about study conduct or methods. Again, we disagree with the conclusions of the FDA statistician. There's plenty of statisticians that disagree with that, including the one on the panel, the ones that work with Amylyx, but also outside ones. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. Again, different people have different opinions. It's a complicated science, I have to say, so it's not easy. So I do appreciate the work that everyone is putting into this, but some of the things that were said, I just don't agree with.
I want to call out that Mark is here. I hope that's okay, who was on the FDA board, and comments that as a patient rep, it'll take more than 48 hours to cool off. So Thank you for what you did on the committee. There's a question about if for people who want AMX 035, can they enroll in the phase 3 trial?
So at this time, the sites are not enrolling new participants. I mean, that might change. So again, more to come on this. I don't know what's going to happen. It depends on many things. So for people who are eligible for the trial, you know, unfortunately at this time, sites are not enrolling, but hopefully, you know, it depends. I mean, again, on what happens, but there might be other opportunities. For people who are not eligible for the trial, there is an expanded access program.
So someone asked if someone can be in more than one EAP, or expanded access, at one time.
So for most expanded access programs, that's not possible. And the reason for that is because each drug is an experimental drug. And so it has a, you know, still new safety profile that we don't fully understand by definition because we're still testing the drug. And so for most of them, it's not the way the programs and the way the companies provide drug is, you know, doesn't allow to combine essentially with other investigational products or other experimental drugs. Again, that's for most. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I would say that that's a general rule.
There's a question about what can the community do to help promote passing of Amylyx?
I mean, I think that the community and the advocacy was really the reason why the FDA, I mean, this has been stated publicly, you know, that they really allow the company to submit the NDA. So I think at this time, I think that obviously, you know, support for approval is, you know, it's great. It would be a great sign for the community to continue to advocate for that. That said, obviously the FDA will make the decision.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions about the statistics, and I'll read them, but it makes me think that we should probably invite maybe the statistician from Amylyx and maybe one of ours who wasn't involved in the trial to answer some of them. Because I do, again, think the FDA got it very wrong on some of their comments. And again, I think the statistician on the committee agreed with us. So could you explain how for Amylyx, the patients who stayed on placebo and did not do the open label extension, the FDA commented that they lived as long as those people who stayed on the real drug?
Yeah, no, that's really like, again, I will have to rewatch the video and check the transcript because again, I'm not really sure how this confusion occurred. So that there was actually, if you watch, not just, you know, there was the initial presentation, but then after the patient testimonies, there was another period of questions where the company actually showed some sort of dose response and clarified that. And so unfortunately, it's several hours into the recording. I think it's probably hour 6 or 7. And so after the patients spoke, after the break, there was another opportunity to explain. And in fact, what was shown was that there was a relationship between exposure and survival. In other words, the people who lived the shortest actually were the people who got placebo and never entered the open label extension. Again, I think I'll have to check the recording and I really don't know how that kind of misunderstanding happened.
Yeah. There were a lot of statements that were made that were frankly just wrong, but it's not a setup where you can do a rebuttal. You know, so, but I do think if you guys like the idea, we could maybe spend one of these sessions, maybe an hour, and really go into some of the issues because we want to make sure people understand clearly. So there's a question about someone who might carry C9, but is not symptomatic yet. Are there any trials for pre-symptomatic gene carriers?
Actually, that's a great question. I'm only aware of a pre-symptomatic trial for people who carry the SOD1 gene mutation, so a different gene. At this time, I'm not aware of a pre-symptomatic program for C9 carriers. Do you know, Merit? If I don't think that's available.
Not yet, but I think, you know, that is where the field wants to go. They're just, yeah, I think that was the hope if obviously on the Biogen drug, if it had done differently, that the next, you know, it would have started to move into pre-symptomatic. But I still think that's, you know, that there's many other companies with C9 drugs and they're starting in symptomatic, but they're thinking about going pre-symptomatic. So there's a question about, again, the Phoenix trial. Are they not enrolling because they're fully enrolled, or are they on hold for some reason?
Well, right now the enrollment is mostly in Europe, and so again that's why it's because we're still waiting for the decision from the FDA.
So are doctors liable for prescribing sodium phenylbutyrate before Amylyx is approved?
That's a great question. So in general, I mean, we can use our license to prescribe off-label. Obviously, one needs to monitor for side effects. So I think, that's definitely possible. Whether the insurance will reimburse it or not, that depends on the insurance.
Yeah. But in the United States, physicians are allowed to do what we call off-label. So we can prescribe drugs for that are on the market for one indication for another indication. So there's a question, why can't we now move to have all people in trials get a complete gene analysis? I believe whole genome sequencing analysis can be done for $600 or less.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's really great to obtain that type of information. So in fact, in the platform trial, we are asking people to donate a sample for DNA analysis, and so essentially that's kind of the goal, to collect DNA and then ultimately do this type of analysis. Yeah, absolutely, that's very informative.
Yeah, and we are doing that in the platform trial for anyone who gave consent for it. We're actually just about now to start contracting with prevention to run all of those. So we have the results this summer when we have the clinical results. So the question, can someone be on an EAP and an FDA approved drug, for example, AMX 035, if it gets approved?
Yes, so for EAPs, you can be on standard of care medications and then the EAP medication itself, just not two EAPs at the same time. But at this time, again, because AMX 35 is not approved, so they will still count as an experimental drug.
There's another regulatory question around the Amylyx. So if the FDA declines to approve AMX 035 this time, based in part on the committee's perspective, can the sponsor shift to requesting accelerated or conditional approval afterwards, despite a negative full approval decision?
I don't believe so, but again, that would be more a question for Amylyx, and so we'll see what happens again in a few weeks. I mean, the good news is that the FDA has to give an answer by June, so by June we will know.
June 29th. Yeah. So is masitinib a drug that's being considered for the platform trial?
So in order for a drug to be considered, they have to apply. And so I think, that will be up to the company to apply to be considered.
Yeah. So there's a quote from Mark. Mark Twain either said or popularized the phrase describing the persuasive power of statistics to bolster weak arguments, lies, damn lies, and statistics. He's ahead of his time. So another question about the AdCom. One important issue was the perspective that the ALSFRS-R is not as valid as a combined measure of function and survival, in this case, the joint rank. Please comment about that, especially in the context of the frequent practice of focusing enrollment on earlier patients where few deaths are expected in a 6-month period.
Yeah, I mean, this is a complicated question, but essentially the ALSFRS-R by itself only measures function. So the problem is that in ALS trials, if somebody drops out because of death, for example, basically that's not accounted if you're only doing a slope analysis of the ALSFRS-R. So there are other methods to account for death, such as the joint rank, which is what was suggested yesterday. The problem is that because of the characteristics of that method, if you only have very few people die, for example, in the case of the Amylyx trial, it was only 7 people over 24 weeks, that method is not as sensitive. So it depends. That's why the argument was that it's not just the method that matters, but also the trial design. In a different trial, the joint rank could be a great model, but again, it wasn't a good fit for that particular trial. But the argument from the FDA was that it should have been used anyway.
Yeah. think what we don't want to do is go back to having to do studies that are 12 and 18 months long. That's how they used to be. And we've pushed field, has really pushed very hard to be able to get an answer in 6 months, which you can argue that's even very too long. And so I do hope that that's not the outcome of what happens from this decision. I do want to, there's a question again about the platform trial and the FDA discussions. And I'll say that we are in a very good position in that we met with them before we even started. We've met with them many, many times and gone back and forth on the primary analysis, which is, it's not exactly the joint rank, but it's because of the platform trial, it's a little more complicated, needs some Bayesian analysis, but we are taking into account both function and loss of data from, either people leaving the trial earlier or any mortality. Though again, because it's a short study, fortunately, people are surviving the study and going into open label, but we do have their agreement on the primary. Now, the thing that came up in the conversation, do you ever really get agreement from the FDA? And not really. Like, you go back and forth and you answer their questions and you submit, and you might or might not hear back from them. So we have not heard back from them, but on our last iteration, but it was over a year ago. So the meeting made me think maybe I have to ping them and see if they're going to answer anything before we do the analysis. But I think we're in good spot there. I don't know, Sabrina, if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, yeah.
We also have phenomenal biostatisticians, really the best in the world for platform trials, the Berry Consultants Group. And I could see when we were with the FDA, the respect the FDA statisticians had for them and their knowledge of how to do statistics for these platform trials. So hopefully we'll have some good results and not have any issues. I'll just add the main issue is this single trial versus 2 trials. The FDA really likes 2 trials. And has been pretty adamant that one study has to knock your socks off, and that's where the disagreement is and where, again, in oncology, they have a pathway to approve based on one study, conditional on doing another study, and Amylyx is doing another study. There are a lot of companies who got approved in oncology and never did their second study. They are committed to doing that so that we have more answers. So we'll see. So there is a question about what's next for Neurone. I'm not sure if we can answer, but I'll pass to Sabrina.
I really don't know, actually. So I'm not really sure. I don't have any specific information.
Yeah. There's a question is, if I'm in the platform trial and I give approval, the HEALEY platform trial will be able to do a full genetic test beyond just the 22 for familial.
Yeah, so to clarify, the DNA analysis that's done in the platform trial is for research. So it's not the same panel that one can get in the clinic. It's actually a more extensive panel, but the results are not returned to the participant for 2 reasons. Number one, it's not gonna be done in real time, so it's done later for research. And so if people want to have their own results and have them now, I recommend that they talk to their physician. At this time, the panel is actually available for free, so there shouldn't be barriers as long as a physician orders that.
Yeah. There's a question of whether oral Radicava might be approved in May, and is there an FDA deadline for that?
There is an FDA deadline in May, and I believe it's May 12th. And personally, I have not seen the data, so I really cannot comment on whether it's going to be approved or not, but as a physician, I really hope so, because intravenous infusions are obviously cumbersome. So I really hope that we can give the drug in a different way.
Yeah. And the follow-up there is all the company has to do is show equivalence of blood levels and safety of the oral versus IV.
Well, if you switch your formulation, yes, because you're switching the way you're giving the drug, so you need to make sure that obviously the drug needs to be the same, but also you need to make sure that when you give it one way, for example by mouth, as opposed to injecting it directly into the veins, you need to make sure that the levels and kind of the effect are the same.
There's a question about whether longer trials would increase the likelihood of a positive outcome.
Well, I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, that's why, you know, in the past, the trials were larger and longer. I mean, I think the Riluzole trial was, I believe, 12 to 18 months. So there were different trials, and were a few hundred participants. That was done in the 90s. And they can help in the sense that the more you follow someone, the more the curves between active and placebo can separate if the active drug really has an effect. But that's not to say that we want to get there again, or we go back to that. You know, again, the idea is to develop more efficient trial approaches like the platform trial, where you can have a response kind of faster. But that also means that you need to use very specific statistical methods, because otherwise, you know, you're not sensitive enough. That was, you know, one of the topics discussed yesterday.
Yeah. It also depends on your drug, like how long your drug takes to get to steady state, or like some of the gene therapies. Now there's some debate about maybe you need those trials to be a little longer. But in the Amylyx trial, we did see the groups separate in 6 weeks. So we were able to see an effect at 6 months, and same with the Darabone. So it depends a little bit on the drug as well. There's a question: does the FDA help researchers develop the trial design ahead of time? Is there collaboration from the FDA in planning for a research trial?
Yeah, I mean, there are mechanisms for companies or investigators to meet with the FDA. And again, they've been very helpful to us, as Dr. Cudkowicz mentioned. And so that really helps fine-tune the details. But, you know, we were particularly fortunate to have, you know, a lot of access as academic investigators when we set up the platform trial.
Yeah. Then there was a question about linear regression. I don't know if you want to, that came up.
Yeah, I mean, I can explain it to the extent I understand it, but basically, the issue is that if the ALSFRS-R is linear, meaning it behaves as a line, as a straight line, if you observe it during a specific time frame. So if you look at, for example, many previous trials, it did behave in a linear way. It was a straight line, which requires certain statistical tests to analyze. Well, in other settings, I know yesterday actually there was a comment on that, you know, in other settings, for example, in the ANSWER ALS study, where it was a long-term biomarker study when the ALSFRS-R was followed for years, not for 6 months, or many, many, many years, the curve can start to behave in different ways. And so for that, you would need different, you know, statistical methods to analyze. But going back to the trial, I guess, you know, the point of discussion yesterday was the behavior of the ALSFRS-R in that particular trial truly like a line, like a straight line or not? And there was some statistical test done to verify the assumption. And so the argument was that, you know, the one statistician said, you know, that yes, those tests verified the linear assumption. And so we could proceed with a certain statistical test. And then again, there was some disagreement from the FDA in terms of whether that was a good way to test for it. So again, it goes down to the very specific details of the statistical tests that were used, that, you know, different statisticians may prefer different things or have different opinions on.
The big picture, I think we heard this in Sabrina's words, is no matter how you did it, whether you did the statistics the FDA way or the Amylyx way, it was still people did better on drug than placebo, whether it was a p-value of 0.03 or 0.05 or 0.07. That p-value means there's a 3, a 5, or a 7% chance that it's not a real finding, or the flip, that it's a 93, 95, or 98% chance of a real finding. So we were debating all day long over really minor things. I think they lost, this is my 48 hours, I should have waited 24 more. They should have, you know, they lost the big picture of this illness. And they didn't have, besides Mark, they didn't have ALS experts on their committee, you know, clinicians. So I'm disappointed, but I think we need to keep advocating, and both the physicians as well as the ALS patient community about how important this is for our patients. So I'll do the last question. It's not about Amylyx. Do you use optical genome mapping in trials? I've read that sequencing does not see all structural variances, including repeats.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. Do you know?
No, I don't know. That's why I asked you.
Okay.
It's a really good question. We'll ask Dr. Brown or one of our geneticists and get back to you next week on that one.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know we went a little over time. See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.